Hi everybody, so today we're going to talk about lesson 4.4. That's going to be about function notation and evaluating functions. So our objective today is going to be to use function notation to name a function and identify inverse versus outputs. And then we're going to evaluate an output given an input. So what does that mean? So we've been talking about domain and range. We've been talking about relations, mappings, and graphs. We've dropped the words input and output, but today we're actually going to be given an input, and we're going to find an output from that input. Okay, so function notation, we have f of x, g of x, h of x, whatever. Those are all just different ways to express y or the output. Now, what does that mean? Well, we're going to see in a minute. Okay, but now, when we are given something like this, f of x equals 2x plus 1, okay, this f of x right here does not mean f times x. Those parentheses does not mean f times x. That just means that our function f is a function of x where x is our input. So f of x means the same thing as y. Okay, so f of x equals 2x plus 1 means the same thing as y equals 2x plus 1. So just remember, x is still the input. Okay, and it's always going to be in parentheses when we are naming functions. Okay, so basically, if I'm looking at model number 1 here, where it says f of x equals 2x plus 1, find f of negative 2, this is asking us to find the output at the input negative 2. So they're telling us that our x value is negative 2. They're asking us to find the output. So what I have to do is take negative 2 and plug it right in wherever I see an x. So f of negative 2 is going to equal 2 times, instead of x, I'm going to write negative 2 plus 1. Okay, now I need to apply my order of operations. So 2 times negative 2 is going to give me negative 4. And negative 4 plus 1 gives me negative 3. So that means that f of negative 2 equals negative 3. My output at the input of negative 2 is 3. So basically the point negative 2 comma negative 3 is on my graph, if I graph that function. Alright, so now let's take a look at letter B. G of x equals 5 minus x. What is the output at the input negative 5? So what I'm going to do is take my negative 5 and plug it in for x. Now be careful. I'm subtracting negative 5. I'm not doing 5 minus 5. I'm doing 5 minus negative 5, which is going to give us 10. So basically that means g of negative 5 is equal to 10. If I graphed the point, or the line on the graph, or on a graph, the point negative 5 comma 10 would be on my graph. Okay? Or letter C, we have h of x equals negative 3x plus 4. Find h of negative 1. So I'm going to take negative 1, plug it in for x. So I have negative 3 times negative 1 plus 4. Negative 3 times negative 1 gives us positive 3. And 3 plus 4 gives us 7. So that means that h of negative 1 equals 7. Okay, so basically, again, we're just finding the output given an input. Okay, all right, now, when we're given tables, it's actually a little bit easier. Okay, remember, the number inside your parenthesis is always an x value. So if they're giving us a table and they're asking us to find f of 0, that 0 is an x value, not a y value. So what I need to do is I need to find the y value at the x value 0. So f of 0 is going to be 2. Now be careful. Please don't write negative 3. Okay? Negative 3 is an x value. And that 0 that's attached to that negative 3 is a y value. The number inside the parentheses is always going to be our x value right here. This number right here inside the parentheses is always going to be an x value. So when they're asking us to find that, they're asking us to find the y value at a given x value. Okay, f of negative 6 is just going to be 1. Alright, now g of negative 1, what I need to do is find negative 1 on the x, which is right here. The y value, or the output at negative 1, is going to be negative 5. Right? G of 10, the input 10 has the output negative 1. Now, letter C is the same thing, except the table just goes horizontally. So h of 0 is going to be negative 9. Okay, at 0, my output is 9. And h of 3 is going to be 10. At 10, at the x value 10, at the x value 3, my output is 10. Okay, now given graphs. Find f of negative 3. Okay, so when they give you a graph, remember, the number inside the parenthesis is always an x value. Okay, when they're giving you a graph and asking you to find the output at a given input, f of negative 3. Okay, what I need to do is find negative 3 on the x-axis. So negative 3 is right here where I just drew that dot on the x-axis. At negative 3, we have one point. The point negative 3, comma negative 2. So that means that at the input negative 3, my output is negative 2. At 0, which is right here on the x-axis, my output is negative 1. Okay? So you're going to find that x value on the x-axis, find the point, or it might not be a point like in letter C. You will see what that means in a second. But find that value on the x-axis, and then find at that x value, what's our y value. So letter B here, we have negative 6. Negative 6 is going to be right here on the x-axis. Now here, we don't have any points at negative 6. So please don't write 0. Okay? There is no output at negative 6, so we can write undefined. Okay? There is no output at the input negative 6. So don't write 0. If you write 0, that's a number. Okay? You have to write undefined. Now, g of 0... this is 0 on the x-axis where I put this dot. At 0, we have the point 0, comma 2. So the output for the input 0 is 2. Okay. Last but certainly not least, g of 9. At 9 is right here on the x-axis. We have 9, comma negative 6. Okay. So that means that the output value at the input value of 9 is negative 6. The output that's attached to the input of 9 is negative 6. All right, last but certainly not least, we have letter C, h of negative 2. Okay, be careful. You need to find negative 2 on the x-axis, not the y-axis. So negative 2 is right there on the x-axis. The y value at negative 2 is going to be negative 6. Okay, h of 0, we need to find 0 on the x-axis. The y value at x equals 0 is going to be negative 1. And then h of 5, I need to find 5 on the x-axis. The y value at h of 5, or the x value 5, is 4. So we can actually draw our little rectangle like that if that helps you, right? For negative 2, I went down, I said, all right, my output is negative 6. For 5, I went up, I said, all right, my output is 4. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that's objective 4.4. Okay, just to summarize, function notation is just another way to write an equation using f of x or g of x or h of x, whatever, instead of y. The x value is always the input. It's always going to be in parentheses. Remember, the parentheses do not mean multiplication. When given function notation with a value in parentheses, they're going to give us the input and ask us for the output. So basically, what is the output value associated with the given input value? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that's objective 4.4. As always, please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions.